Hey guys, tonight we're going to do something a little different. You won't need to shout. You won't need to chase. You won't need to prove yourself. Instead, just sit, breathe. Let the noise of the world pass like traffic outside a closed window. Because tonight's topic isn't about getting louder. It's about getting quieter and becoming more powerful because of it. This is 5 underrated tactics smart people use to control any situation. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Part 1. Have you ever been in a meeting, a group chat, or even a family dinner where it felt like everyone was trying just a little too hard to be heard? Voices overlapping, people interrupting, someone dropping buzzwords like confetti. And somehow, the louder they speak, the less anyone's actually listening. It's exhausting. But have you noticed every now and then there's someone in that same room who says almost nothing, and still, everyone notices them? They're not scrambling. They're not grandstanding. They're still, present, sharp. And when they finally speak, it's like the room shifts around them. What is that? That's not luck. That's design. And tonight, we're going to explore how that presence is cultivated. Let's start with the first tactic 1, commanding with silence. Most people believe if you don't raise your voice, you'll get drowned out. That if you're not loud, you'll be forgotten. But the Stoics knew something different. Something most of the world has forgotten. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." Let that sink in for a second. In a world screaming for attention, what if your edge is silence? What if your ability to remain still while everyone else flails is exactly what makes you unforgettable? There's a kind of silence that isn't passive, it's watchful, strategic, intentional. Picture this. You're in a high-stakes meeting. Everyone's talking over each other, cutting one another off, throwing ideas around like grenades. It's chaotic. And then there's you, sitting quietly, not out of fear, not out of shyness, but because you're watching, reading, gathering data. Not just listening to words, but to motives. You're waiting not for your turn, but for the right moment. The one where your voice will land like a pin dropped in a quiet room. That's not performance. That's presence. It's the difference between needing to be noticed and knowing you will be. Think about this. What kind of presence do you give off when you don't need the room to validate you? When you don't rush to speak, just to fill a silence. When you let the noise pass like weather and speak when your words can cut through the fog like sunlight. That's real power. And it doesn't beg. It doesn't shout. It doesn't interrupt. It waits. It lands. It commands. And here's the thing. This isn't about playing games. This isn't manipulation. It's mastery of perception, of timing, and most importantly, of yourself. Seneca once said, "It is a great thing to know the season for speech and the season for silence." Smart people don't just speak well, they know when not to. Let's move into the second underrated tactic. 2. Strategic humility. We live in a world obsessed with performance. Social media rewards announcements, previews, behind-the-scenes glimpses of how busy or successful you are. But the Stoics, They were never interested in being seen. Epictetus warned, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." Now that quote might not seem connected to humility at first, but think again. What happens when someone insults you, challenges you, dismisses you? Do you react? Fire back, defend yourself, or do you observe? Without reacting because you know their words don't define your value, that's strategic humility. It's not about shrinking or playing small. It's about staying grounded because you already know who you are. You don't need applause. You don't need rebuttals. You're not playing the same game. Let me give you a scenario. You're in a heated discussion. Maybe it's at work, maybe with a partner, maybe online. Someone throws a jab, maybe even questions your intelligence. In that split second, your ego rises, your throat tightens. You feel the surge of adrenaline, the urge to clap back. But what if you didn't? What if instead you said nothing, not because you're scared, but because you've already won? You've chosen not to be dragged into a lower level of dialogue. That kind of humility, strategic humility, is terrifying to people who rely on drama for control. They expect a reaction. When they don't get it, they lose their power. Carl Jung said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." And in moments like that, what you don't do often says more than anything else. Because silence forces people to face themselves. You become unreadable, unshakable, unexpected. You don't need to defend your worth, because you've already approved of yourself. Let me ask you something right now. Quietly, privately. Are you performing or are you present? Are you trying to be seen or are you grounded in who you are, whether anyone notices or not? That's the kind of question smart people ask themselves daily, in their journals, in their quiet hours. Not to shame themselves, but to realign, to return to their center. You don't need to announce your next move to the world. You don't need to broadcast your brilliance. You just need to build it. Let your actions be so sharp, so complete that when they speak, they end the conversation. Let's pause here. Take a breath. Let your shoulders drop. Let the tension in your chest fall away. Because we're not even halfway through this journey. We've seen how silence commands attention. We've seen how humility becomes strategy. But what happens when conflict arises, when tension flares, when someone presses that one nerve that always gets you? How do smart people control that situation? We'll talk about that in next part. Part 2. We've already talked about how silence commands attention, about how strategic humility disarms those who try to provoke you. Now we step into the heart of human friction conflict and how smart people don't avoid it. They reshape it. Because here's the third tactic 3. Controlling through curiosity. Most arguments you've ever had weren't about truth. They weren't about right or wrong. They were about identity, about ego, about the deeply human need to be seen as valid, intelligent, and good. You felt attacked, so you defended. They felt unheard, so they escalated. But what if you could completely disarm conflict, not by overpowering the other person, but by shifting the energy? That's what curiosity does. And it's one of the most powerful, most underused tactics in existence. The Stoics knew this. Socrates didn't try to win arguments. He asked questions that made others stop and examine themselves. He didn't say, "Here's why you're wrong." He asked, Why do you believe that that's a radical shift from trying to be right to trying to understand? Imagine the last heated conversation you had. Someone brought up a political opinion that made your blood boil, or a family member pushed one of your lifelong buttons. Your instinct was to argue, to show them the flaw in their logic. But what would have happened if you had paused, breathed, and asked? That's interesting. What led you to that view? Not sarcastically, not as a trap, genuinely. What might they have said? Here's the truth: when people feel safe enough to explore their own thoughts without being attacked, they open up. And when they open up, change becomes possible. The best thinkers don't corner others. They create space. They don't just want victory. They want clarity. And that's the essence of real control, not dominance, but influence through safety. Carl Jung said, "Thinking is difficult. That's why most people judge." And he was right. Creating space for someone to think, not defend, may be the most transformative thing you can offer them. And it starts with a decision. Will I react or will I reflect? Here's a practice that can change everything. Next time you feel that surge, the rise of defensiveness, the mental armor snapping into place, pause. Ask yourself this: am I trying to protect my ego, or am I trying to connect with truth? That question is brutal, but it's freeing. You're not here to win every debate. You're here to win yourself back every single time your ego tries to hijack the moment. Let's pause again and bring this into modern practice. Imagine you're journaling tonight. Simple prompts. No fluff. Try these. When did I react too quickly today? What was I really trying to protect in that moment? What would it have looked like if I responded with curiosity instead? This is how Stoicism meets reflection, not as dogma, but as a daily mirror. As Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Mastery begins in the milliseconds between stimulus and response. The Stoics trained for that space, and you can too. Now, let's move into the fourth underrated tactic, one that seems almost too simple, but in practice is incredibly rare. 4. Moving in silence. In today's world, people announce everything: plans, goals, big things coming soon. It's performative, it's exhausting, and often it's a trap. Because when you preview too much, two things happen. 1, you waste energy signaling instead of building. 2, you invite distraction, doubt, and premature feedback. Seneca said it best: "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." So here's the shift. Smart people move quietly, not because they're unsure, but because they're focused. They don't talk about their niche project. They build it. They don't hint at their next pivot. They prepare it. Then, one day, they move. And it's not loud. It's not messy. It's decisive. You don't see the preparation. You just see the result. That's not being secretive. That's being intentional. Think about lightning. It doesn't announce itself. It strikes, sharp, clear, unmistakable. That's the metaphor for effective action. And it only comes when you stop previewing and start building. Let's make this practical again. Here's a journaling prompt. What project or idea have I been talking about but not executing? What am I afraid will happen if I simply begin? Most people are stuck not because they're incapable, but because they've made a home in the preview loop. Planning, announcing, rethinking. But motion isn't progress. Execution is. Clarity doesn't come from overthinking. It comes from doing. Plato said the beginning is the most important part of the work. So begin. Don't post about it. Don't tease it. Just act. Let your work speak for itself. Let it end the conversation. That's how quiet people become undeniable. Not because they yelled, but because they delivered. Before we move into the fifth and final tactic, ask yourself, what have I been previewing instead of producing? What would it feel like to go completely quiet and just build? Let that question rattle around in your chest. Let it challenge you. And when we come back in part 3, we'll explore how silence isn't just presence, it's leverage. We'll talk about the kind of quiet that makes people lean in, the kind that turns discomfort into power. Because the final tactic is the most subtle and the most dangerous. And it changes how every room sees you. Part 3-5, using silence as leverage. There's a moment in every conversation, especially high-stakes ones, where silence becomes unbearable. You've felt it. You're in a negotiation, a disagreement, maybe even a job interview. Someone asks a difficult question, and instead of answering immediately, you pause, and in that pause, everything shifts. Their eyes dart, their smile flickers, their voice rises slightly, just to fill the space. Why? Because silence makes people uncomfortable. We've been trained to interpret it as weakness, confusion, or rejection. But here's the truth. Silence isn't a gap in control. Silence is control. Think about how most people operate. They rush to respond, to justify, to agree, to soften tension. But smart people, they wait. They let the silence stretch just enough for the other person to reveal something extra, because that discomfort, it makes people talk. They say more than they planned. They negotiate against themselves. They explain what they fear, what they want, what they assume. And you're not just listening, you're learning. This is silence as a weapon, not of manipulation, but of presence. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." And what is silence if not the ultimate act of being unlike the world? The world yells, you don't. The world rushes, you wait. The world begs to be seen, you observe. That's leverage. Not because you're cold, but because you're composed. Let's talk practically. The next time someone says something provocative or asks something difficult, don't rush to respond. Instead, try this. Pause. Count to 3. Not dramatically. Just long enough for you to decide what comes next. That small pause shifts the power. It says, I'm not reacting, I'm choosing. And people notice that. They feel it in their bones, even if they don't consciously understand it. Because here's the thing, silence isn't always empty. Sometimes it's so full that it says more than any words could. Let's take this further. In negotiation, the person who speaks last often holds the power. Why? Because silence forces the other person to fill the void. They reveal assumptions. They hedge. They sometimes make concessions you never asked for just to end the discomfort. This works not just in business, but in life, relationships, interviews, debates. When someone asks you something designed to provoke, corner, or pressure, you try giving them space. Don't flinch. Let them sit in what they just said. Let them wonder what you're thinking. That's the moment where your silence becomes a mirror, forcing them to look at their own reflection. It's not passive. It's not afraid. It's presence. Amplified. Here's a journaling exercise for tonight. When was the last time I spoke too quickly and regretted it? How would silence have changed that outcome? What emotions does silence trigger in me? Why? If silence triggers anxiety, the answer isn't to speak faster. It's to examine what that anxiety is protecting. Usually, it's the ego. And the Stoics were very clear on this. Ego is the greatest barrier to wisdom. Epictetus said we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. But most of us do the opposite. We speak to prove. We listen to reply. Smart people reverse that. They listen to understand and only speak when their words are anchored in clarity, not emotion. There's one more level to this. Silence isn't just power in dialogue. It's power in decision-making. Most people make decisions reactively pressured by timelines, opinions, or emotional waves. But what if you took a beat? What if, instead of rushing to say yes or no, you said, "Let me sit with that," not to stall, but to choose from stillness? When you pause before reacting, you invite insight. When you move from silence, your action becomes surgical. This is where modern Stoicism becomes real, not just theory, but application. Seneca taught no person has the power to have everything they want, but it is in their power not to want what they don't have. What he meant was this: restraint is freedom, and nothing demonstrates restraint more than being able to wait. Let's go deeper for a moment. Ask yourself, what would my life look like if I spoke 20% less and listened 50% more? How many mistakes would I avoid, not by being perfect, but by being quiet? Where has my need to have a take robbed me of the opportunity to learn in today's world? Everyone is expected to react immediately, to give an opinion on everything, to comment, post, defend. But when you don't, when you wait, you break the pattern. And in that break, you reclaim control. Not just over the conversation, but over yourself. Let's close this part with a metaphor. Imagine a room filled with people shouting, trying to be heard. It's chaos. Then one person walks in, doesn't say a word, just stands, calm, grounded. They don't interrupt. They don't defend. They observe. And over time, the room quiets. Not because they asked for silence, but because their presence made it necessary. That's the kind of presence you're building. Not by dominating the conversation, but by becoming undeniably composed. And that's not luck, that's design. In the next part, we're going to bring all of this together. Silence, restraint, curiosity, precision. We'll explore how these aren't just tactics, they're a complete shift in how you move through the world. We'll talk about building inner leverage, why being underestimated is your secret weapon, and how real influence doesn't need the spotlight, it owns the shadows. Type continue to get the next part. Ban John Noy. Continue ChatGPT John Noy, Part 4. Let's bring everything we've discussed into sharp, deliberate focus. We've explored silence as power, curiosity as disruption, precision as presence. And we've seen how smart people don't scramble for control, they cultivate it. Now let's elevate the game. Because what we're really building isn't a tactic. It's a state of being. Call it Stoic strategy, quiet command, inner mastery. But at its core, it's this: control doesn't come from dominating others. It comes from not being dominated by yourself. So, in this part, we're going to explore how to own the room, the moment, and your path without ever raising your voice. Let's start with an underrated form of power, owning the room by owning yourself. There's a kind of presence that doesn't chase validation. It radiates certainty. You've seen it before. At a party, at a meeting, even on a train. One person stands out not because they're loud, or attractive, or flashy, but because they're so comfortable in their own skin that you can feel it across the room. They're not posturing. They're not performing. They're just being. That kind of presence is magnetic because it's rare. And it's rare because most people haven't done the inner work required to reach it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." And most people's thoughts, they're borrowed, reactive, noisy. But the Stoic mind, it's curated, grounded, filtered. So what does this mean for you? It means that controlling any situation doesn't start with other people. It starts with a dialogue in your own head. And that's where journaling becomes your weapon. Not the pretty kind, the real kind, the pages where you unpack your insecurities, question your reactions, confront your assumptions, where you write, "Why did I need to prove myself today? What did I say just to be liked? Where did I give away my energy trying to be seen?" This is how smart people build presence in private. So when they show up in public, they don't need to grab power. They already have it. Let's explore this even further with an uncomfortable truth. Most people don't fear being seen. They fear being seen before they're ready. That's why we hesitate. That's why we overshare. That's why we perform. Because we're trying to manage how we're perceived instead of managing how we perceive ourselves. So here's the inner shift. Stop building an image. Start building an identity. And identity is forged in reflection, in restraint, in the thousands of unseen decisions where you choose to stay aligned instead of stay popular. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free." And what's braver than refusing to sell yourself for likes, applause, or attention? What's braver than staying composed in the face of disrespect? What's braver than knowing you don't need the room to clap for you to know your worth? That's not arrogance. That's inner architecture. Now, let's add another layer to this mastery. It's not just about what you say or don't say. It's about what you choose to see. Because power isn't just posture. Power is perception. Here's what I mean. The average person walks into a room and wonders, how do I look? What will they think of me? Will I be accepted? But the smart person walks into that same room and scans for patterns. Who's leading without speaking? Who needs to be heard most? What energy is being avoided? They're not focused on being seen. They're focused on seeing. And that switch from self-conscious to self-aware is a game changer. It's the difference between being in the room and reading the room. Let's put this into real practice. The next time you walk into a space, social, professional, or otherwise, ask yourself, what's really happening here beneath the surface? Don't just listen to the words, watch the dynamics. Who interrupts? Who leans in? Who looks down? When challenged, you're not judging. You're observing, because every room is a system, and smart people don't fight the system. They read it, understand it, and then move through it like water. Stoicism teaches us not to resist life, but to align with it. And that includes social energy. So don't try to control people. Learn how people work, and then bring your calm to the chaos. Because when you stay composed, when you don't react the way they expect, you become the most powerful person in any room. Let's return to your private practice. Journaling prompt. What am I consistently trying to control? Is my need to control rooted in fear or in clarity? What would it feel like to trust myself in silence? Most people want control because they feel uncertain, but smart people build control by becoming certain of themselves. And when you're certain of who you are, you stop chasing outcomes. You stop chasing responses. You stop chasing and you start guiding, not others, yourself. That's where mastery lives. To close this part, let's revisit something Marcus Aurelius said. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. This isn't about philosophy as theory. This is about philosophy as form. Every silence you hold, every ego you don't feed, every time you wait when the world demands you rush, you're not just playing it cool. You're building something eternal. You're becoming the one who doesn't need to control others to control the outcome. Because the moment you stop reacting, you take your power back. In the next part, we'll bring all 5 tactics together into a single, flowing strategy. We'll talk about situational awareness, non-reactive dominance, and how the most dangerous person in the room is always the one who has nothing to prove. We'll also explore how Stoicism isn't a mindset you visit when things go wrong. It's a way you move when everything is on the line. Part 5. Everything we've covered, every tactic, every Stoic truth, every reflection, it's all been building towards something deeper. Because this isn't just about controlling one moment or winning one meeting. It's about crafting a way of moving through the world that is so composed, so grounded, so precise, that people feel it without you having to say a word. Now, we're going to bring all 5 underrated tactics into one cohesive rhythm, a system of presence and power that transforms you first, and then everything around you. Let's recap. Command with silence. You don't need to fight for space. You become the space. 2. Practice strategic humility. You don't need to prove yourself. You've already approved of yourself. 3. Lead with curiosity, not ego. You don't control with pressure. You guide with questions. 4. Move quietly, strike sharply. You don't announce your power. You demonstrate it. 5. Leverage silence like a blade. You don't rush to respond. You let the silence work for you. When these 5 come together, you're not just reacting to the world, you're designing your way through it. So now, let's talk about how to put them into motion. Building real-time presence. Imagine yourself walking into a high-pressure situation, an interview, a negotiation, a conflict, a crossroads. Everyone's anxious. They're trying to read the room. They're trying to be impressive. They're trying to figure out how to say just the right thing to get what they want. And then there's you. You walk in, not slowly, not dramatically, just grounded. You don't need to scan the room for approval. You've already done the inner work. You're not looking to take up space. You are the space. That's presence. And here's what makes it deadly effective. You are unshakable, not because nothing affects you, but because nothing controls you. You've replaced panic with precision. You've traded noise for nuance. And you've trained yourself to listen not just with your ears, but with your entire nervous system. That's the kind of presence that changes the outcome of a room's. And people feel it. They may not know why, but they lean in. Let's go deeper into how smart people manage energy instead of attention. Most people chase validation, likes, compliments, promotions, applause. But validation is like sugar. It spikes quickly and crashes just as fast. Smart people trade validation for leverage. They don't need to be told they're doing well. They've got receipts. They don't need everyone to like them. They need to move with purpose. They don't seek visibility. They build value. That's how they gain control, not through manipulation, but through mastery. They know exactly what they're bringing to the table. And if the room doesn't see it, they don't panic. They pivot. As Epictetus said, "Seek not that the events should happen as you will, but let your will be that they should happen as they do, and you shall have peace." Translation: adapt like water, but remain shaped by purpose. Let's get brutally honest for a moment. What are you actually trying to control right now in your life? Is it a situation, a person, an outcome? What if the path to control wasn't external at all? What if it was about building such an internal foundation that no matter what happened around you, your clarity remained untouched? That's the Stoic ideal, and it's more practical than people realize. Here's a dead simple framework to build that internal clarity. The control compass. 1. What do I truly want here? Not just what you think you want. What do you want at the core? Peace, progress, integrity. 2. What can I control right now? Thoughts, breath, response, action. 3. What will I choose to let go of? The need to win, to be right, to be liked. 4. What action reflects the highest version of me? Not the version that reacts, but the one that creates. Use this compass anytime you feel the urge to control something outside of you, because real control starts within. Here's a practical micro habit that sharpens this control muscle. The 2-second Stoic pause before you speak. Text, post, email, or react. Pause for just 2 seconds and ask, is this me responding with clarity or with insecurity? Those 2 seconds can save you hours of regret. It's like adding a filter to your thoughts, one that lets only aligned energy through. And over time, that pause becomes your superpower. While others are triggered, you're choosing. While others spiral, you're anchoring. While others overextend, you're building leverage. Now let's bring it all into a high-stakes scenario. Picture this. You're about to have a difficult conversation. Maybe it's with a friend who hurt you, a boss who's undervaluing you, a client who's drifting. You know it's going to be tense. Here's how you apply the full framework. Silence first. Don't come in guns blazing. Start with presence. Breathe. Let your calm do the opening. Lead with curiosity. Help me understand what happened from your side. Don't chase control. Let the other person talk. Don't interrupt. Let the room breathe. Speak from clarity, not emotion. Here's what I noticed. Here's how it felt. Here's what I need. Close with stillness. No need to dominate. No need to extract an apology. Let your presence speak for itself. That's what smart people do. They're not trying to be impressive. They're trying to be undeniable. And that difference, that's what changes lives. Let's journal this one out. Try these questions tonight. Where in my life do I feel the need to be louder? What fear lives underneath that need? How would a calm, grounded version of me move instead? These questions don't just build insight. They build identity. And once you've built that identity moment by moment, response by response, you don't just control situations, you change them. When we come back in part 6, we're going to take this even further. We'll explore the psychological pattern of being underestimated and how the quietest person in the room can often be the most dangerous. We'll talk about the invisible leverage that builds in silence and how to make your next move so clean, so focused, that it doesn't need permission, applause, or introduction. Because your power isn't about how you're perceived. It's about how you choose to proceed. Part 6. We've reached the edge of something powerful. By now, you understand that the loudest person in the room isn't always the one in control. Often, it's the one you never saw coming. The one who didn't need the spotlight. The one who watched, waited, and moved with surgical precision. Let's talk about that person. Let's talk about you becoming that person. Because here's the truth. Being underestimated is a superpower. In a world that prizes hype and hustle, being overlooked can feel like failure. But to the Stoic mind, being underestimated is leverage. It's freedom from scrutiny, freedom from pressure, freedom to move without resistance. See, when people don't see you coming, they don't prepare defenses. They speak more freely. They miscalculate your value. And while they're busy performing, you're busy positioning. You're collecting data, sensing rhythm, not reacting, just observing, until you strike. And when you do, it's not loud, it's not messy, it's final. Plato wrote, "Courage is knowing what not to fear." And when you no longer fear being overlooked, you stop rushing to be seen. You stop over-explaining. You stop proving, because you know that pressure doesn't create diamonds. Stillness does. Let's drop into a real-world metaphor. Imagine a chess game. The average player moves fast, makes big moves early. They want to dominate the board quickly because they equate aggression with strength. But the master holds back, observes, sacrifices a pawn, maybe two, creates the illusion of simplicity, and then one precise move changes the entire board. The opponent never saw it coming. That's the Stoic strategist. Understated, underestimated, unforgettable. This is what we call invisible leverage, the kind you build in silence. Let's flip it inward for a second. Ask yourself, where in my life am I afraid of being underestimated? What would happen if I stopped trying to fix that and started using it? That fear of being overlooked, it's often tied to ego. But the Stoic doesn't serve ego. The Stoic serves purpose. So being underestimated, that's not a problem. That's a shield. And behind it, you build in silence, without distraction, without applause, you craft your edge. This leads us to one of the most powerful mindset shifts in modern Stoicism: move like lightning. We live in a culture obsessed with pace. Faster is better. More is better. Speed equals success. But here's what smart people know: there's a difference between motion and momentum. Motion is just activity. Momentum is aligned, intentional execution. So here's the pattern. You build in silence. You study. You prepare. You wait. And then, when the moment opens, you strike. No warning. No build-up. No endless previews. You just move. Like lightning. Quick, sharp, clean. And the world doesn't know what hit it. That's not force. That's precision. That's not overcompensation. That's clarity. That's not noise. That's impact. And the key: you only get that power if you're willing to wait. If you're willing to be underestimated while you work in the shadows. if you're willing to hold back your fire until the moment is earned. Let's talk about practical execution. Here's a question to bring it home. What's one thing I've been talking about but not doing? Write it down. Look at it. Sit with it. Now ask, what would it look like if I acted on this without asking for permission? No big announcement. No external validation. Just quiet, intentional action. This is how you reclaim power from performance culture. You stop signaling, and you start delivering. Here's an exercise for tonight. Write out the one move, just one that you know will shift your direction. The conversation you've been avoiding, the idea you've been circling, the change you've been putting off. Then answer this. In writing, what's stopping me? Whose permission am I waiting for? What happens if I just begin, and then begin? Quietly, sharply, without fanfare, because lightning doesn't warn the sky, it simply arrives, and when it does, everything changes. Let's pause here. Take a breath. Feel the tension of everything we've talked about building up in your chest. Now exhale and let it drop, because the final pieces are coming together. In part 7, we'll explore the art of not responding, how walking away, staying silent, or simply choosing not to explain yourself can be the most potent move of all. We'll talk about why you don't owe the world your energy and how to protect your focus like it's the last currency you have. Because in the end, what you withhold often defines your power more than what you give. Part 7. We're entering the most subtle and arguably the most misunderstood form of control, the art of not responding. In the world we live in, silence is often interpreted as weakness. You didn't respond to the text, you must be guilty. You didn't defend yourself, you must agree. You didn't post your take, you must not care. But what if the opposite is true? What if not responding is the highest form of strength? The Stoics understood this centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius said the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Let that sink in. Not louder, not pettier, not more dramatic, just unlike. In a world addicted to reactivity, restraint is revolutionary. So let's talk about what happens when you don't respond. You reclaim your energy. You create space. You force the other person or the world to sit with their own behavior. You break the expected cycle of provocation and reaction. It's not passivity. It's presence. It's the conscious choice to conserve your most valuable resource, your attention, because attention is energy, and energy is the real currency. Every unnecessary reaction, that's a withdrawal. Every emotional outburst, that's a drain. Every defensive explanation, that's your power being auctioned off for cheap. And smart people don't give power away just to feel heard. They protect it like treasure. Here's a truth you need to internalize. You don't have to explain yourself to everyone. You don't owe everyone a take, a reply, a defense, a justification. The people who truly see you don't need all that. And the people who demand it often, they're not looking for understanding. They're looking for control. So here's your challenge. Let them wonder. Let them sit in their assumptions. Let them fill the silence with their projections. Because what's rare becomes respected. And in a culture where everyone's performing, your quiet refusal to participate is the performance. Let's explore the psychology of it. When someone provokes you and you don't respond, they lose their grip. You didn't play their game. You didn't match their tone. You didn't flinch, and that confuses them. It exposes them. It shifts the power dynamic without you lifting a finger. It's what Carl Jung called withdrawing the projection. When you don't give people a surface to bounce off of, they're forced to face themselves. And that's where real transformation happens, not just for them, but for you. Here's something brutally honest. Some situations don't deserve your words. They deserve your distance. Not every battle is worth fighting. Not every challenge is a calling. Not every misunderstanding is an invitation to explain yourself. Sometimes, the most stoic thing you can do is walk away with clarity and tact. Aristotle said, "Anybody can become angry, that is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, that is not easy." Translation: control your fire or be consumed by it. Let's go deeper with reflection. Journal this tonight. What's the last thing I said that I didn't really need to say? Who am I trying to convince when I over-explain? What would it feel like to just let the silence speak? Because silence isn't empty, it's space. Space to think, to regroup, to observe, to move with intention instead of urgency. When you choose not to respond, you're not saying "I don't care." You're saying "I care more about preserving my alignment than participating in your chaos." And that's control most people never touch. Here's a visual metaphor. Imagine you're holding a mirror. Someone walks up and starts shouting at it. Do you shout back? No. The mirror stays still. And in that stillness, the person is forced to see their own reflection. That's the role you play when you stop reacting. You become the mirror, still, grounded, unmoving, and everything that's not aligned with your clarity collapses in its own noise. Now, let's move from silence into stillness. Because the final form of control, the one that underpins all others, is not what you say or don't say. It's how you carry your energy. Smart people don't chase impact. They become it. They don't seek influence. They radiate it. And that radiance is built in solitude, in clarity, in choosing what not to give your energy to. Let's leave you with a question. What would my life feel like if I gave fewer reactions and made more decisions? Sit with that. Because when you stop explaining and start embodying, everything shifts. You don't win arguments, you win yourself. And in the next and final part, we'll bring it all together. We'll slow things down and reflect on how to live this philosophy, not just in meetings or negotiations, but in everyday moments that build your life. We'll explore how quiet power becomes a lifestyle, how stillness becomes a legacy. Because true control isn't about dominance, it's about direction. And you get to choose where you're going silently, surely, and without apology. Part 8. Let's slow down now. We've spent the last hour building something strong, something ancient, but personal. A blueprint for invisible influence. A path that doesn't shout for attention, but commands it in silence. We've studied the masters Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, Socrates, Plato, Jung, and we've translated their wisdom into 5 powerful tactics. 1. Command with silence. 2. Practice strategic humility. 3. Lead with curiosity, not ego. 4. Move quietly. Strike sharply. 5. Leverage silence as power. But what now? How do you take these from philosophy to practice? How do you live it? Let me tell you a secret. The most powerful people don't just have stoic thoughts. They have stoic systems. They don't rely on willpower. They build rituals. They refine reflections. They make stillness their default, not their backup plan. So in this final part, we're going to explore how to turn all of this into a lifestyle. Let's start with the daily one. The morning stillness ritual. Before you check your phone, before you answer that message, before the world reaches for your attention, reach for yourself first. Sit, breathe, be still, even for just 5 minutes. Ask, what's mine to carry today? What isn't? What can I let go of before the day even begins? This is how you program presence before pressure arrives. This is how you armor yourself in clarity. And that armor, it's made of silence, patience, and grounded decision. 2. The Daily Journal of Control. The Stoics wrote, every day. Marcus Aurelius' Meditations was never meant for the world. It was a letter to his own soul. You can do the same. Every evening, open a journal and reflect. Where did I stay composed? Where did I react and why? What will I do differently tomorrow? Keep it simple. Keep it honest. Over time, your journal becomes a map of how you learn to move silently through chaos, how you grew from reactive to intentional, how you went from trying to be seen to becoming undeniable. 3. The practice of letting them wonder. Every time you're tempted to over-explain, to defend, to post a reactive take, to rush a response, pause and say to yourself, let them wonder. Let them sit in silence. Let them write their own stories. Let them fill the blanks. Because if you spend your life clarifying who you are to people who don't even know who they are, you'll lose the most important voice in your life, your own. Let them wonder. And you stay focused. 4. The walk-away power. Sometimes the strongest move is no move at all. Walk away from the noise, not in bitterness, not in fear, but in clarity. Because peace isn't passive. Peace is earned through discipline, through knowing what to engage with and what to leave untouched. Seneca said sometimes even to live is an act of courage. In this world, to live quietly is an act of rebellion. So walk away when needed, not because you're weak, but because you're free. 5. The quiet launch. Whatever you're building, launch it without warning. Not because you're hiding, but because you've already done the work. Let it speak for itself. Let it arrive like lightning. Let your actions finish the conversation that your mouth never started. You don't need a standing ovation. You need to stand in your own vision alone, if you must. Because when that vision is real, the world has no choice but to adjust. Let's land this with a final meditation. Right now, wherever you are, pause. Breathe in slowly through your nose. Hold. Exhale softly through your mouth. Feel your spine straighten, your jaw unclench, your eyes soften. Let the noise fade. And remember this, you don't need to speak to have presence. You don't need to fight to have strength. You don't need to dominate to lead. You simply need to be still long enough to become precise. Control is not about force. Control is about choice. And the person who can remain silent when others shout, who can wait while others rush, who can see while others react, that person becomes undeniable, and that person is you. Thank you for joining me here tonight. If this journey stirred something inside you, there's more waiting, another video just beyond this one that goes deeper into the philosophy of silent strength. Click it when you're ready. And until then, protect your peace. Master your energy. Let your presence do what words never could. You don't need to be seen. You just need to be centered. Take a moment now and let everything settle. No need to rush back into the noise of the day or the scroll of the world. Just stay here for a little longer. Let the quiet linger. Let it wash over you like warm water on tired skin. You've just walked through something rare, a space where your strength wasn't measured by volume, but by presence. A place where stillness became your ally, and silence wasn't empty. It was full of meaning. You don't need to remember every word from tonight. You don't need to get it all perfect tomorrow. That's not the point. The point is that you're learning to move differently, more calmly, more clearly, more powerfully. And it doesn't have to be loud. It never did. So tonight, as you close your eyes, or if you're still awake, just lying there, let yourself feel the weight you didn't carry today. The arguments you didn't chase. The validation you didn't beg for. The silence you allowed. That's not weakness. That's mastery. You are not falling behind. You are not late. You are exactly where you are meant to be, becoming someone the world doesn't quite understand yet, but will feel when the time is right. You're not here to impress. You're here to align. You're not here to perform. You're here to embody. So breathe in slowly, one last time tonight. And when you exhale, let it carry away everything that isn't you. Thank you for spending this time with me. You've earned your stillness. Let it hold you gently, like the quiet before dawn. And when you're ready, drift. Sweet dreams.